everybody, Peter the Panda here, also known as Peter the Worgen in my off time. This is going to be another PvP informative Shadowpriest video talking about gear, corruption, and essences, what you should have in your back pocket as a Shadowpriest to optimize your damage and survivability in Arena. Now this is going to depend a lot on what comp you're playing, whether you want more survivability or more damage. So I'm going to start with what I play every single game in Arena, and I'm playing with a rogue in 3v3, so I'm going to be kind of the focus most of the time, not always, but against most teams, this is the set that I put on right away. It's just called 3 Gushing on my little save, and I play 3 Gushing Wounds. I try to put them on the highest item level pieces possible. This is going to increase your damage because the corruption scales off of item level. So I've got a 475 piece, a 470, and another 470. So ideally in the future I'm going to be looking to replace that. I actually have a Gushing Wounds in my bag just waiting to swap out some of my corruptions, hopefully upgrading my ring to the mythic one if I can get that. And from my 3 Gushing Wounds corruptions, I'm also playing with 2 haste stamps. That's the 12% expedient. Very useful for a Shadow Priest. All casters pretty much have kind of jumped on this because it's super fun to play with super haste. But I feel like when I'm playing with a melee DPS, I don't want to have too much haste because then it just feels like it's unnecessary and I'm too squishy if I lose too much verse. So I'm kind of equally prioritizing haste and verse right now. But since I have more verse amps on than haste amps, all of my gems are versatility. So like I said, 2 haste amps and I've got 3 verse amps. I have full gems for verse and I have verse enchanted on my rings as well. That's just because I want to stay above that 30% margin in Arena. I'm going to be the focus against quite a few teams, and if I don't have that much versatility, it feels like I'm super squishy. I've tried playing against like RMP, for example, with really low verse, because sometimes they don't train me at all, but as soon as they see how fast my casts are playing in a haste set, they just make a quick swap to me, and it's like I die in like the first 4 seconds of a stun. So really depends on what you're playing. I think if you're playing with a Warlock, you could get away with this low of a verse, but teams are going to kind of catch on, and eventually at high ratings, it's just not going to work out playing really low verse. You could do 40k DPS, you could try to crank as hard as you can, but when you're dying in 3 seconds, it's really not worth it, in my opinion. But still good to have these extra sets. Like against caster teams, I think it's totally fine to play this amount of verse. If I'm facing Mage Warlock, I feel like I could play very well with my positioning and my greater fade ability to negate incoming damage. I just feel like if I had twice the versatility here, it's not going to save me from 2 G-Pies and a Demon Soul Chaos Bolt. Like, you're pretty much overkilled. Anytime you mess up against Mage Lock, it's really, I feel like it doesn't have to do too much with your gear. It's more so your positioning and your awareness in the arena. So this might actually be a set that I play against a Mage Lock team. Like, I could run this much haste, I could run this low verse, and it would be totally fine if I'm playing smart. However, if I fought a rogue mage as this, like I said, they could literally just kill me in the smallest amount of CC. Speaking of extra sets, I've also got a Versatility Set. Let me fix this. I'm playing, this would be about 46% verse outside of Arena, and then I could also swap out for more verse too on that. So I'm at 50% in this set, and I would actually use this against certain teams where I know that I'm going to be the target the whole game, and if our only priority is just to dampen and live and win, I might actually play this. It doesn't happen too often, but it's useful to have for sure if you're trying to really min-max against certain teams. Alright, that should cover the corruption side of this video. I'm going to talk very quickly about the Trinkets. I play this Vita Charge Titan Shard almost every single game, just for this static haste increase alone. I'm getting about 5% haste from it with my haste stamps on. Also, the proc is super powerful. It's a 1600 haste proc, gives your teammates 300 haste as well. Really like this trinket. When it's up, I feel like I just have so much more utility as a Shadow Priest. My mass dispels are nearly instant. I can mind control better, get into void form faster, get out of void form. Just a super powerful trinket. I also like to know when it's up, so I use this weak aura, or tell me when rather, to tell me when it's up, and kind of highlights it right where I'm looking most of the game. I have trouble tracking my buffs up here because there's just so many trash buffs that I don't know, I kind of like having this extra awareness right there. I'm also playing Psyche Shredder. Very useful for the comps that I play. If you're playing with a Warlock or a Rogue and you have spread pressure, you want to play this trinket because it's going to proc 31k damage and cause your enemies to suffer an additional 1.4k damage from your dots. Very cool because if you have multiple dots up, which you should have your VT and your Shadow Word Paint up, it's going to keep proccing an additional 1.4k damage. So if you have 2 dots up and you're Mind Flaying and Gushing Wounds, that 1.4k is going to multiply times 4, and you're going to have a nice little decent increase in your damage for that window when it procs. I did a quick arena just to test out my damage with it. It was a very quick game. Had procced 8 times, it hit for a max of 32k, did 5.1% of my damage plus 2.1% if you add that additional dot tick on there. So not bad. I think if I had played Claw, I would have probably only gotten 1 Claw off, and since I was playing against a Hunter, they could feign death it off. I was also playing against a Paladin who has 2 outs to Trinket Dispel it or Bubble Dispel it, so the Claw would have done less damage. Could have even done no damage if they played around it and used a cooldown to get rid of it, which is why I don't like playing it into a lot of teams. There are certain situations where Claw is totally better to use. I'm going to show a quick example after this actually of how good it can be. Playing against Mage Warlock, I'll typically drop the Shredder and put the Claw on, even drop the Vita sometimes too, because the spread pressure is less important, and we're going to go for a more bursty setup with either a Maledict or this Voodoo Doll. This Voodoo Doll is good if you don't have the Claw and you don't want to raid. You can get it from Underrot. I have it on my alt, and I think it's super fun to use. People aren't as aware of its damage as they are for Claw. It just has a little long of a ramp up time. So good to know, good to have those trinkets. Let's go ahead and get into the essences now. I play these most of the time. Every single game you should have Breath of the Dying, super powerful for that 10 corruption resistance, and also the lethal strikes proc is going to be quite a bit of damage as well. I think, yeah, did 8% of my damage, so very good. Memory of Lucid Dreams, that gives you 466 verse proc, and also refunds Insanity Drain, which is super useful too. A lot of shadowpriests are going to play this every single game for that verse proc alone. Condensed Life Force, this is the only one I would maybe consider trading out sometimes. Kind of RNG, whether it does damage or not. Did 2.8% of my damage, that's not a whole lot. Let's see if it did more here. Yeah, 4 points. So not really that good, honestly. I don't know if this is that good to play. I've also seen it break CCs, so a lot of times if I want more verse, I'm going to play Vision of Perfection. Also going to reduce the cooldown of my Shadow Fiend, give me 113 verse. Another good one to play for haste is the Essence of the Focusing Iris. If you play with a Warlock, I would probably play this every single game. You'll have really good uptime, and if you're playing Mind Trauma and you have haste amps on, you'll be having a lot of fun as a Shadow Priest playing those. So these are totally you can totally rotate these depending on what comp you're playing and what you're facing. As always, it's good to have them in your bags to know when to break them out. I typically never change from Conflict and Strife either, by the way, so definitely have all of these max rank, kind of a grind. If you're lazy, you're kind of missing out, so yeah. Alright, this is one of the few teams we don't go for the spread pressure Psyche Shredder strategy. We're going to try to burst down one target while the Druid CC'd, so Claw, very good in this situation. They don't have any other way to dispel it other than the Druid. The Druid has no trinkets, so here's the ideal time to Claw. My Shaman shoots his Claw, I use mine, the Mage is going to trinket and gate away and absolutely just die to the 2 claws behind the pillar while no one's even near him. I also threw a Mindbender on him as well, because I'm playing the Vision of Perfection build to always have burst for our CC. So as we see, nobody's near the Mage. We're all running at him, and our claws just completely did the work, brought him to about 20%, and then the rest of the damage killed him with just like passive rogue dots and my Shadow Word Pain. I didn't even get a VT up, and that was just a super easy win. So great example of how good Claw can be. And also good to point out that we made sure to use them when they could not be dispelled, when the Druid did not have Trinket. Okay, here's an example of what spread pressure looks like. I Shadow Word Pain the Druid, it procs a Gushing. I Void Bolt him and it procs a Psyche Shredder. He is dying in the silence while the Warlock is also dying. We forced Dispersion from the Priest while literally not even targeting him, just having passive damage on him. At this point, we could really kill anything. All we're doing is trying to keep our dots up and make the Druid use as much mana as possible. They're in a situation where I don't think they can recover if I keep my dots up and if my rogue keeps his dots up, so just trying to spread pressure as much as we can. Which is why the Psyche Shredder Trinket's good. Claw would not have been that good against this team, just because the Druid is typically going to be able to dispel it. If your Trinket's blind, the only real CC we have is Silence to cover it, and Silence only covers 5 seconds of the 8 seconds of Claw, so he's going to be able to dispel it. Or the Priest could MD it. overall I think I just benefited more from the shredder here. So as you can see, I literally got CC'd that whole time, did absolutely nothing, and my passive damage was able to spread pressure on this team. One more example of me playing Claw and Maledict into the mage lock composition that everybody loves to face. My Shaman has his Claw still, so I tell him when I'm ready to CC, and my CC is going to cover his Claw so it cannot be dispelled. He knows this is a good time to use it. Rogue knows when to kidney. We're all in sync here. So we get the mage to cauterize, I chain my CC, and we're going to easily force this ice block. Now I actually could have maledicted there and maybe absorbed the cauterize, but I think he would have blocked anyway, so good to hold on to it in that situation for me. Since we forced the cooldowns, all we're going to do is run away and wait to do that again when our CC's back up. So we'll have a blind coming up, we'll force his Trinket, and then we're going to get that exact same stun, fear, silence, on use Trinket combo to try to finish them off. Now I usually play Maledict because the lock is the kill target later into the game and dampening, but since we're not in dampening and we've already forced ice block, we know this mage is just going to go down here. I tell my rogue my CC is ready, come out of the lockout, I get the monk into CC before he's able to heal at all. The Maledict's on there as well, so even if he ends this, or even if he gets out of this infinite CC chain, he's going to have to dispel that Maledict to actually heal him. If he cocoons into it, it's going to absorb quite a bit of that heal as well. So really not anything they could do there. If he came out and dispelled, he would have got BT dispelled, and we probably just would have won anyway. So that's one last example of how to use these on-use trinkets. You got to make sure you have the CC to cover them. You can't just throw them out. They're going to get dispelled, and they're going to do ultimately no damage or no healing absorption. So hope that clarifies some questions on gear, trinkets, usage, all that good stuff. Let me know if you would like to see anything else or if you have any other questions. Thanks for watching.